Hello and welcome to the Focus on the Family Facebook Live for December. My name is Aaron Ng and I'm your host for tonight's episode. Before we introduce our speakers for tonight, I want to give a big shout out to all our viewers who have been tuning in for the past few months. We really appreciate your support. And for those who are tuning in for the first time, a warm welcome to all of you. Tonight, we have a husband and wife pair with us, Boaz and Claire Nazar. They are married for 24 years and they are parents to a young adult and a teenager. They have more than 20 years of experience conducting marriage preparation programs. They are also practicing lawyers, master trainers in the preparation and relationship education program, and they both volunteer as family life educators with Focus on Family Singapore. Welcome, Boaz and Claire, to our show.
Hey, hi, Aaron. So good to be here.
Yes.
This is our last, I think, Facebook Live for the year also.
So for all the friends of Boaz and Claire, or you just want to give them an encouragement, you can click the heart and thumbs up icon to show them your support. So during the show, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask us, or to you just want to type it out on the comment section, and we'll try our best to address them. So feel free to type in, and then our colleagues also will be there to answer your questions. So, audience, Boaz Claire 2020, what a year it has been. Wow, right? That's the only word we can say to sort of like describe both, hopes yet, aspirations, maybe hopes dashed for some. Yeah, maybe some dreams that people had and, they were not able to fulfill them. But, we hear the term coronavirus or COVID-19 is like the central focus for most of our attention. But actually what the essential part of it is that, we are all fighting against it is to really protect our loved ones, those who are close to us, our family members, and maybe even our neighbors. And through the pandemic, we have learned that our actions affect others more than we think. Yeah, and in the time that we spend together with our family members, some of us thrive, but some of us also struggle alongside the people that we love the most. And we have done a couple of surveys. I think both of you are familiar with our surveys that we have done this year as part of our research. We want to have a handle of how families are doing and how we can help. So we're just going to show you some stats, and then we're going to have a discussion along the way. And then for the audience, if you have any questions for Boaz and Claire, feel free to type in, and then we'll try our best to answer them. So one of the first surveys that we did, right, the big survey, is that we realized for fathers that for work from home arrangements have really resulted in quantity time with their children. In fact, 73% reported that they have increased involvement with their family, and out of which 85% said that they connected more with their children. And when we asked them, or when we, this survey that's being done said that there's 9 out of 10 people wanted to continue this work from home arrangement. So my question to both Boaz and Claire, was this a similar experience with both of you? Were you able to spend quantity as well as quality time with your children?
Yeah, I think when you mentioned that 2020 is an interesting year, I think the word unprecedented has been used quite a lot. And as we went into 2020, a lot of excitement, a lot of stress as well, because it was my son's O-level year. And then we found ourselves in the circuit breaker, that 3 months, right? And thinking about it, the word I would say was finding our momentum was the key here. And it was interesting to be at home. And I think, like what the survey said, I think for a lot of fathers, it would have been a new situation where they were forced to be at home as opposed to being at the office. And that would be particularly important if you're dealing with younger kids. For us, the upside of it was that circuit breaker forced the kids to be at home also. so we made it easier for us to all be together at home at the same time for longer periods of time.
So you know what they're up to.
Yeah. And I think that was fun, because we had transited, as you mentioned, our eldest is now 22, is a young adult. My son is 16, so they're a little bit more independent. And it was good to have that time where we were all together, reconnecting with one another, and finding that rhythm in family life.
So Claire, mothers reported to us that they really appreciated their husbands stepping in with the caregiving and the household chores, and that gave them a break from the stress, anxiety that they were facing because of the pandemic. So as we, step into the end of this year and into 2021, how can mothers encourage and perhaps even allow their husbands to continue to be involved at home?
Well, I think 1 year is really quite a sufficient amount of time to really establish some habits. Of course, some would be have to go back to work, and so there's probably a change in routine or back to what it was pre 2020, pre COVID time. But even then, things are not never going to be the same again. So I would say that one way to encourage is to actually plan and discuss as a family. Say, hey, what were some of the good things that we encountered this year? What were some of the good routines we established? And actually be intentional about it for 2021 and say, okay, I noticed my husband has been cooking a lot more. And so now, and we enjoy his cooking. Well, I'm obviously a beneficiary of it. So I have no complaints. He's a good cook, good chef, and he learns fast. So that's very helpful. And of course, I do appreciate having a man in the house to do all the little fix-its here and there, reach the things that I can't do, fix all the things that I don't want to fix, myself. So that is helpful. So what we do is that we've discussed about this as a family and say, hey, going into 2021, how about we continue some of these routines? Maybe not as regular, as it was during the whole circuit breaker time and now re-entry back into normalcy, right? Is to then say, okay, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, we can have more eat-in sessions at home, more family days, more family dinners, where we actually intentionally set aside time for that. So that's the one good thing that's come out of it. And I think it really is helpful during this year. My takeaway and highlight of the year is really that the family did get closer together. I enjoyed my time with my son. In a year where O-level year, I'm supposed to be seeing less of him. I'm seeing a whole lot more of him, more than I could ever ask for. So I get to hug my son a whole lot more, and he's like squirmy, like stop hugging me, mom. But things like that I appreciate. So so this is really a good time in this whole year to kind of reflect, take stock, especially Christmas around the corner, to really think about what were some of the routines we've established. I know that a lot of my friends have established like exercise routines. So for myself, I've gotten in the habit of having daily walks or daily jogs. So that's quite good. So I find that there's some things that we can take away and say, hey, actually we don't have to remove these routines. We can actually put it in very intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd just like to add on to that. The other way of looking at it was a time of regrouping. And somewhere along the lines, we found that there are some things that were important or we enjoyed that as we transited into the different phases as the kids got older, we may not have been doing so often. And so during this period, we've established some routines of doing things together on Saturdays, what we call habits, and so now we are starting to exercise together as a family, whereas previously we would be doing our own stuff, and little what we call what's that word for it? Family sort of habits, if I could say, like I just can't find the right word. Okay, and so I think this is something that we like to continue for 2021. Yeah.
Of course, I think for mothers, praises help. It never hurts to flatter your husband. It's a good boost in self-confidence, obviously. So I think the same thing that we would do with our kids. I don't see why we can't do that with our own spouses. Say, oh, that's a really nice dish you cooked. If that is what you want to encourage, the way that we encourage behavior is good behavior, or encouraging behavior is the one way to start it. Instead of nagging or criticizing. And sometimes we're not even aware, right? Especially during circuit breaker time, we're all in it together in the same house, in a, enclosed and confined in the four walls, we tend to not be mindful about the criticisms that can come out. I mean, we do know that from neuroscience research that 80% of the time, our brains are wired for negativity. So we're not even half aware that we're being negative. So sometimes when you have everybody in close quarters, then people are telling me off, hey, mom, you said that like one too many times already. It's like, oh, did I? I didn't even notice, or stuff like that. Or I say to my husband, hey, I think you hit your quota of constructive criticism for the day, for example. So, so stuff like that. And then we begin to be more mindful and have a greater self-awareness of our own words. And so this is something that I think it's highlighted a lot for this year. So I would say that this year alone has really taught me to kind of like, watch my tongue, what I say, especially when you're going to be living in such close quarters and that kind of frequency. And then any word we say can be a trigger, because behind in our minds, what's operating in our own minds is our own negativity, our own negative patterns, and also our own negative views of one another. Like we have certain ideas that we think about each other. Oh, mom is always a tiger mom, or dad is always a slacker, the one who likes to have fun all the time, and that those kind of things can sort of like seep in very, very subtly. So which is not a good thing, and if you're not careful, it comes out in words which can be a trigger.
Yeah, so Claire, you mentioned about all these negative thoughts that people are having, and then it just slips out one day. They're just so frustrated at home with all the stresses that are around them. And in fact, unfortunately, with juggling the work from home and home-based learning that many parents had during the circuit breaker, plus on top of that, the fear and all the stress that comes from the pandemic, we've seen an increase in domestic violence and calls to counseling helplines in Singapore. This is in fact, we read the news and we found out there's a monthly average of reported cases increased by almost 100 cases during the time of circuit breaker. In fact, more couples were also seeking counseling as a result of all these tensions from working from home. So for our viewers, I'm not sure if the time spent at home brought out tensions for you and your family, but if it did, perhaps you could type in the chat, what were some things you did that helped you cope with all these tensions? We hope to learn from each other, and do share with us if your relationships at home grew stronger as well, despite the tensions. So Boaz and Claire, we talk about all these tensions. Who at home found this year the hardest, and why?
I think it's very easy. It's my mother-in-law. She stays with us, and before the circuit breaker, work from home, she'd have the whole place to herself. Claire and I will be off at work. The kids will be off to school or with their friends. So basically, she had the whole house to herself. And then suddenly she found us all at home 24/7. And I think that was a big intrusion and adjustment for her. But I mean, the same thing applied for all of us. I believe that I would say that I suffered quite a fair bit. Okay, not because of anything, but my own introverted nature. Okay, and Claire's laughing because we have this running joke. She refuses to believe that
not an introvert.
I'm introverted. So we've had this discussion for many years now, and I think it's not surprising that there have been an increase in marital issues generally, because we all need our space, and for some people even more, right? It's not that you don't want to engage with the family, but you just need that alone time, that space to recharge, especially if you're dealing with issues in the office. You may be at home, but the workplace issues are still there, and I think one of the difficulties was actually drawing lines between work and office, right? You take a day leave pre-COVID, people will not disturb you. But during circuit breaker, and if you wanted a day off, right, people still can't stand, like, I can get in touch with you, So it was very difficult to draw boundary lines. And I think couples who are having marriage issues already, then found themselves that they didn't have that space, because when you go off to work, you do have some time apart from each other, and that helped you cope with what's happening at home. But when you are forced to be with each other for 24/7 and you don't have the tools to deal with the conflict that can arise, like I mentioned, some would be the negative interpretations and the escalation that comes with reacting to situations. And if you don't have tools to deal with it, then it's no wonder that we saw an increase in the number of couples seeking counseling. We found it difficult to find that rhythm, adjusting to one another, finding those boundaries, finding that safe space, so that we could detox, from the stress, so that we could then interact meaningfully, And I think that was, although I say it was me who suffered the most, which I think Claire would disagree. I think we all were affected. And I think that would be one of the main reasons, finding those boundaries and being able to be ourselves, so that we could be better when we are with our family.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the issues, couples would normally kind of like bury it under the carpet. And they've got like the busyness of the day, they've got their work, or for some couples, they work overseas, and then they come back. So there's always that space at that time where they could reflect about things, come back and decide, and resolve, I'm going to make things better. I can come back with a bouquet of flowers. You've got that time and space to then think positive thoughts about your partner. But when you're in the house together all the time, day in, day out, it's very difficult to recover. It's like before you can recover from the last blowout, you have another blowout again, and then you have another one, and then it accumulates, and then after all, everybody's just frazzled and tired. One of the things that I found helpful, especially in this year, was decluttering. Okay, I found that the complaint that my husband has about me, like, can you just like keep this thing neat and tidy, always, gets my goat, because the thought that runs through my mind is, I'm so busy, I've got all these things, wait till I have time to get to it. And you always come after me when I don't have the time. When I'm busy with something, that's when you come and tell me, the house is not tidy. I said, yes, but I'm in the middle of a work deadline right now. Okay. I said, can't you address this when I am free? But the problem is I'm never free, right? We're never free. We're always busy doing something. And so this circuit breaker has been good, because we found ourselves with, free time that we normally would send the kids to school. Okay, that's free. So in the morning, suddenly I have a little bit, block of time. Then I don't have to pick them up from school in the evenings. Okay, that's another block of 1 or 2 hours in the evening. And then I found myself decluttering and actually dedicating some time. And the more I decluttered, the more peace we had at home, because I found that, my husband feels more at peace with his surroundings, more zen. Okay. And as for myself, I found it as a form of accomplishment that I actually began to clean out, and do spring cleaning on things which I normally wouldn't do or have the time to do. So I think some of these things are good stuff, which I'm telling myself, okay, I can be more intentional about decluttering. But I think when it comes to decluttering, there is also the need to declutter what's going on emotionally as well. So that's also the other part in terms of strategy. What I normally do is that in the mornings, I would have my me time, where I have my cup of tea, and I'll use the time for my morning walks, and use the time to take a breather, and then just enjoy nature, and just say, just thank God for my family, and just spend a few minutes just giving thanks, right? Being grateful. I think gratitude goes a very long way. It does help a lot, because then when you are irked with one another, you can remind yourself that, hey, there are things I do value about my children, the things I value about my husband. And so you kind of like have more patience, that you'd be more forbearing.
Yeah, so that's something that also we've realized that when couples understand about there's this tempo, that they've gotten into, there's this a pattern of sorts of saying, hey, I actually can take some time to breathe throughout the year, have my own space. Yeah, but there are some, of course, with the things that they are worried about, because they could lose their jobs anytime. It could be one of their family member might be away, and for a long period of time they cannot be back home.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of stress and anxiety that comes from this that affects them both emotionally as well in their mental health. And this is something that we, realize that one of the positives that surfaced during the circuit breaker and the months after that was there's an increase in mental health awareness.
Yes.
On the Straits Times article on 10 October, which was also World Mental Health Day, it was reported that more people in Singapore sought help for mental health issues. And on the national platform, whether it's in the news, in the schools, we started talking more about mental health, even as they started seeking help from professionals. Were there any mental health concerns among your family members, or even for your closer friends during this year?
Well, my family has been telling me for quite a number of years that I need to get help, especially when I tell those dad jokes, So, specifically for us, I think it was quite stressful, but not to the point where it was a serious concern. We do know of couples who experience a lot of the fallout from the stress of not knowing the job situation, the pressure cooker at home, and things like that. And it's not again, not surprising. I think we live in a pressure cooker society. There's a lot of stress coming in different areas. And if we don't have the tools to deal with it, then there is going to be that fallout from that. And especially during that 3 months where suddenly we didn't have time to prepare for it, right? We just found ourselves in that situation. And if anything has shown me over these past few months is that many of us are not equipped to deal with the stresses of life, the stresses that come up in family. Not to do this as a plug-in, but I think coming out of this, a lot of people should be thinking, what can we do to equip ourselves? Okay, there are a lot of more marriage education, family education, parent education, and wartime reveals how prepared you are, right? So during that circuit breaker COVID time, that was like a war situation, and many found themselves not prepared for it. And the best way to prepare yourself is in peacetime. So going in 2021, when we are now going into phase 3 and things hopefully comes back a bit more normal, I think one of the things we need to ask ourselves is, how can we better equip ourselves? How can we better prepare ourselves? And I think there are a lot of good tools out there that will teach us how to deal with stress individually, how to communicate better with our family, our spouse. And if we are able to do that, it will not eradicate stress. It will not eradicate the problems completely, but at least it will minimize its impact.
I mean, one thing that I found is that in this year is to really look at the glass that's half full rather than looking at the glass that's half empty. Of course, we know that this is a global pandemic and it is depressing if you want to look at the negative aspects, but there are also opportunities that we can make use of. I mean, this whole Zoom literally took off, okay, literally zoomed, okay. And suddenly everybody is using Zoom, and just before COVID circuit breaker happened, before this whole pandemic was the world was taken by storm by it. I was just talking to a friend about using Zoom for a meeting which involved several parties in a legal dispute, legal matter. And the lawyer on the other side was telling me, oh, it's been ages since I used Zoom, I said, yeah, right. But, it is what it is. And so since everybody's cross-border and everybody's in different countries, so we use Zoom for that purpose. And just right after that, next thing we know, everybody was using Zoom. Even, our grandmothers are using Zoom. And we found ourselves able to connect with our extended family in a way that we never could before. Or maybe it just never occurred to us. Like I said, Zoom has always been there. All these platforms have been there. It's just that it took a crisis like this for people to then start looking at other alternatives and saying, oh, how else can we, what can we do to connect? And I must say this year is interesting. I've been in a few conferences, a few meetups with friends as well via Zoom, and I found that it was still good for mental health. It was great to be able to talk to my friends and share our problems, and I learned some stress relieving techniques from one of my friends in a lean-in circle that I've got going as well. And so things like that is actually quite good. So there are many other platforms that we can use without having to be there physically. It does not mean that it can take the place of face-to-face, but in a situation like this, there are opportunities that we can seize upon. Yeah, so I think that is something that will go a long way, especially for mental health issues. And I'm really so heartened to hear that people are actually turning to hotlines as well. And perhaps there's that sense of anonymity, or the sense that there's somebody there on the other side talking. It's really helpful. Yeah, more helpful than some of the IT chat lines I've been on.
Boaz, you were saying, tongue in cheek, that you were telling dad jokes, and that your family members are saying probably you need to get checked for your mental health, right? But could it be that dads also have a certain fear of exposing or sharing about their fears, about their concerns to their family members, because they don't want to be seen as vulnerable, they don't want to be seen as weak, but actually they're going through a lot of pressures, especially with the uncertainty with career, or with the year ahead. Can you maybe suggest some ideas that men can engage and to share their problems with someone? Could be their spouse, it could be anyone, but how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, it doesn't come naturally to men to share their problems. Even when we talk to our guy friends, we tend to keep it very at a certain level. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is to really assess who our friends are, and who we can actually cultivate a relationship where we are comfortable sharing what is going on in our lives. Okay. This is, of course, on top of sharing with our spouse. Okay. And even with our spouse, one of the things that we do in the marriage class that we teach is to get couples to practice sharing a concern with one another. Because, in relationship, it's not always talking about issues that you have with your spouse, but being comfortable with sharing the concerns that you have at the workplace, extended family, things like that, And so we try to get premaritals to get into that habit of sharing with one another the things that they are concerned about. And this is a useful practice to develop with your spouse. But you can also then cultivate it with your good friends, right? When you sit down, have a cup of coffee, it's good to ask one another, is everything all right? But of course, the typical response will be, yes, everything is fine. So the idea here is that you have to be a good friend as well and learn how to ask each other questions. Bring it down to feelings. How do you feel about certain things? What's going on in the workplace? And it helps to take your mind off your own problems when you show interest in your friends or your spouse's issues as well. And then you get a perspective, right? So to cultivate good friendship, you have to be a good friend as well to your spouse, and just find one or two good guy friends if you're a guy, and if you're the wife, then good lady friends, and cultivate that, that friendship where you really are able to share with one another what you're going through. That support group actually makes a big difference.
Yeah. So if this resonates with you as an audience, you can give them a thumbs up or a heart-shaped icon, because I think all of us really need that close friends. All of us really need that sounding board, especially if we are facing a lot of stress at home, and that we have all these mental health challenges that we may not want to see a professional yet, but at least speak to someone that you can trust. So looking back on this year, do you think that you have understood your family and yourself a lot more? And is there any personal lessons that you have learned for yourself?
Definitely. I mean, just to add on also a little bit to what we said just now, during this period, I've really come to appreciate my children a lot more, especially my eldest. And she's really sensible, okay, in a lot of things. And I'm very thankful that we managed to cultivate a good relationship when they were young. And now that they are older and she's an adult, we are able to talk to her like friends. And there's certain things we are able to share with her, and she will give us her viewpoint. And some of it is really good advice, and we see it through her lenses. And so I want to encourage, our viewers who are watching this, who have young kids, the investment, spending time with them, really pays off, and you will see it when they go older because you spend that time with them. And so I've learned that my daughter is very sensible, and she's very practical, and and so during this period, it's especially that has come to light, and we've had some good laughs together. Yeah, sorry. I hope that answered your question. I think I may have gone off a bit.
No, because you that's a personal lesson for yourself. You learn that your daughter
sorry.
is very practical.
Oh, sorry.
I think it could be a
somebody at the
McDonald's
door.
delivery.
Okay, just let you in. It's a
Apologies.
tradition for us whenever we do a Facebook Live or a meeting on class to order McDonald's in post the session. So I think the guy came a little bit earlier.
But that's my husband's excuse, actually. He uses introvertedness to say, "Oh no, I need to have this." Okay,
So
that's
sorry
okay.
for that.
Kind of learn to let that slide. So yeah, that's also one of the things. Learning to let things slide. If anything at all I've learned this year is that it's okay. You don't have to pick a battle with everything. Some things may irk you. Ask yourself the question, is it okay to let it slide? And you
Yes.
will very quickly learn what are things that you can slide about and what are things that you should not slide about.
Very
When
true.
you have a young adult as a daughter, okay, she's very quick to speak her mind. And that's a good thing. So I really appreciated, like what my husband said, all the sensible advice she's given to me, especially sometimes in things that we are unaware of, our own blind spots. So this is why we need other people to tell us, because we're not always aware of how we irritate others or irk others. And one thing that I've learned over this 1 year is the different trigger words that cause my children to be upset with me. So one example I can cite, just quite recently I learned this and we had a good discussion. And like I said, it's these little things that conflict doesn't have to be a barrier. In fact, sometimes conflict, if you have a good time talking about it, it's something that draws you closer. And this was one clear example where I learned that for my daughter, I cannot start a sentence with the words, "You have to plan." The minute I say you have to plan, it gets her on a goat because of our past history and how, I have this often used or overused saying, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And I didn't realize that over the years, it's irked her so much that when I tell her things like, "Oh, you have to plan," she immediately gets upset because she says, "Why is it going to be my responsibility for certain things, especially when it comes to fun stuff?" I tend to tell her, "You have to plan for this fun activity for the family." "Oh, anything to do with the family staycation, you have to plan, Hosanna. You got to plan." And so she gets really irked by that. And then I found out that actually she enjoys getting the whole family involved in the planning. She may be the fun person in our family, but it doesn't mean that I should be throwing the whole responsibility on her for that. And so these are things that we kind of learn and say, "Hey, this is really good stuff." I'm learning along the way, learning to be a better mom, better listener. And the fact of the matter is that we're all growing. No one's perfect. I think that's the most important thing to learn.
So, Boaz, you mentioned earlier about the wartime and peacetime, and it seemed that during COVID and circuit breaker, that was like the wartime that we are facing. But wartime can happen anytime, right?
Yes.
Wartime can happen tomorrow. It could happen next week. But how do we build our home to be a safe place, even though there's a storm that's raging outside? How can we make our home somewhere our children or even our spouse would feel comfortable coming back home to?
I think it comes down to two things. The first thing is, of course, communication, because that's the lifeblood of any relationship, and especially when you have people together, and learning how to communicate without trigger words, learning how to share things safely, I think is very important. And the good news is these things can be learned. The other thing would be carving out your own safe space, because I think a lot of times when we have a short temper with our family members, it's because we're stressed out about other things. It may not necessarily be that they are doing something that is stressing us out. When we are calm, when we are relaxed, when we're not stressed out, we tend to be more patient, right? And the same thing that our spouse does or our children does, when we are calm, not an issue. But when we are stressed out, maybe about work issues or even financial issues, and then they do that very same thing, we just have a short temper, right? So I think learning how to deal with stress, having that quiet space, things that will take our mind off our problems, being able to relax, it goes a long way towards building a safe home. And again, not many people have that opportunity to do that, or to have the ability to do that. And so again, this is something that can be taught, and I think that's the good news.
Yeah, I think what is key is really learning how to time out. Telling yourself that you need to have a timeout, and how you take that time out is really important, because I find that a lot of couples, especially they, it's not just a lot of couples, even for myself, when we are in the emotional trap, so to say, of our emotions. Okay, I mean, sorry about the circular language used, but what I mean is that when you're so caught up in being angry and all your hot thoughts and all your angry thoughts, and it's very difficult to break out that momentum. It's difficult to break out the momentum of negative energy that's there. And I think one of the trick is to learn how to be self-aware. And the faster we learn to respond, respond between the time when we get upset to the time that we calm down. Okay, to see if we can reduce that response time or their reaction time as to the point where we can learn to be more self-aware, and we can then hopefully be saintly enough to actually be able to walk on water. But what I mean is that in order to be able to connect safely, it takes a great deal of self-awareness. And unfortunately, I've learned in this year alone that I've not been self-aware as I would like to be. And it took a lot. It took feedback, feedback from my family to tell me, I'm not doing this so well as I thought I was, not handling stress the way I should be. And I think the key is to be humble, to say, okay, yes, just take ownership, own up for your own mistakes, your own words. That you can do, that anyone can do. We can always own up and do our part and say, okay, yes, made a mistake there, and move on. Don't beat yourself over it, but say, okay, what can I do better next? And try to remind yourself that if you're going to go from 0 to 100 in terms of your anger in a split second, try and break that circuit, okay, of anger. I would say break that circuit by having some intervening thoughts straight away, to say, can I let this emotion pass? Or whatever you are about to say, recognize you are in that emotion and say, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let this emotion pass me by, because the emotion will pass. We forget that the emotion will pass, you see. It does pass.
Yeah.
No matter how angry you are, give you 20 minutes tops, right? If you sit there all by yourself, seething in your anger for 20 minutes in a corner of a room, you will let that feeling pass. You can't stay angry for that long. Your body just cannot handle that kind of level of stress. Okay, so when you calm down, then you can take stock and say, okay, do I still feel like saying the things I wanted to say 20 minutes earlier? Okay, so that's some of the things that we can practice. I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. And it is really helpful to have family members around who will tell you off. So, okay, and to be able to eat humble pie and say, yeah, I'm going to own up to that. That goes a long way, because your family members, when they see that you're responding that way, even though you may have irked them, then there's also that sense of hope, you see, that things are going to change. that we are all going to better ourselves. And that's the kind of environment I think we should be having.
Thanks, Claire. I think that's really practical, and the fact that we need to be humble and also to learn from the things that we have been through, the emotions that we have experienced. We don't want to remain angry. We definitely don't want to go through the same cycle of being angry again and again. I have a comment here from Joanna. She says that she was at a webinar today about at the international research recently completed of 72 countries on the impact of COVID on family life. Interestingly, religion, faith, and acceptance were the top 2 common coping strategies cited across countries, especially in Asia. Does that resonate with Boaz and Claire?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, prayer and meditation is really important because it's important for you to know that there's something bigger than yourself. And that's very helpful to know, okay, that you know you're not in control of a lot of factors in your life. And to know that there is a God out there for every faith, for that matter, is helpful, and prayer does something to us. In fact, I was just listening to another podcast today that there's something about singing. When we sing, we kind of like employ the back of our throats, and that kind of like activates a part of our brain that then releases good hormones, happy hormones that comes out. So singing helps, right? And if you sing,
people that go karaoke.
Yeah.
Actually, that
No,
too.
singing-
But coming back to religion,
I have to disagree. Singing only helps if I'm not the one singing. Okay, because when I sing, it doesn't produce good feelings in my family members. Okay, I may feel good, but they don't feel good.
Oh, we feel very good. We feel like laughing all the time, so that's good.
But I think that faith is very important.
Yeah.
And for us, our faith is very important because it gives us hope. And with hope, then we can persevere. We can pursue better things. We don't give up hope. I think we're talking about mental issues and challenges. I think that really becomes a problem because people lose hope, and so faith has held us steady, especially in the difficult times. The other thing that I think Joanna mentioned was about acceptance, and that is so important. One of the things that the research shows in the marriage area, especially, is that different is not wrong. Okay, we may be different, so we need to acknowledge our differences. We need to accept the differences, and just acknowledge each other's strengths. So Claire and I are different, but doesn't mean that my way is the right way and hers is not, and vice versa. And over time, we've learned how to accept our differences, acknowledge each one's strengths. And so, yeah, I think acceptance and faith really are quite important. Yeah.
So before we wrap up for today's episode, if you could share one encouragement for our viewers today, especially if you're stepping into 2021, what is one encouragement that you want to share with them, whether as a parent or as a married couple?
I'll let Claire go on this.
Okay, I mean, there's so many things, right? But I would say that if we could do our part to make it safe to connect.
Yeah.
Because we have all these ideals about connecting, and then when it falls flat in our faces because we have certain views and certain expectations, and when those expectations are not met, then World War III happens, and that's where another storm starts, brewing, especially in family life, And so it's very important to remind yourself, to ask yourself, am I being safe? Am I safe in the way? Am I venting or am I sharing? Am I ruminating or am I thinking constructive thoughts about how to solve a certain problem or how I should do things better? So making it safe to connect.
For me, I think 2021 is just a reminder that things don't have to remain the same. We can always look for ways to improve the situation, no matter how bad it is. It's never, as Claire says, it's never going to be this. It's not going to be like that all the time. Especially if we assess the situation, see what are things which are within our control, and then get help if we need to. I think this is something that I'm glad to say that a lot more people are open to getting help. And so my takeaway from 2021 is that things can change, and we should try and make things change for the better.
So a couple of comments that came in that, they said that difference is what makes life interesting. Faith gives hope and keeps us steady. Christmas is coming, so let's all sing carols and release good hormones. Yeah.
Yes.
Karen says, let's give and take as a family, especially going to 2021. There are some people that you might want to forgive, people that you might want to engage and speak to, and to, just to give your feedback, but not your negative kind of feedback. But So, Boaz and Claire, we just want to appreciate you for coming in. This is like your last Facebook Live for the year, right?
Yes.
And your happy meal is waiting for you.
Yes, my happy meal is waiting for me.
All the good feelings are coming out now.
Let's give them a round of likes and hearts to encourage Boaz and Claire. They really shared lots of good stuff today. I think we are leaving this episode learning a lot from both of you. And as we start the new year, I would like to highlight a series of parent-ed dialogues by Focus and Family Singapore that's happening in January. These are face-to-face sessions happening on Saturday mornings where you'll be guided to know your parenting style and to try out innovative approaches to guiding your children. Even though you'll be phase 3 by then, seats are limited, so do register early. And you can find more details at the link provided. If you have enjoyed today's episode as well, do remember to click like and follow our Facebook page. And after you've done that, there's an additional step I think most of us are not familiar with, is you need to click the following drop-down button, and you can see the word select See First to receive the latest updates in your news feed. All right. So if you want to follow a page that you really love, click the See First button and you'll get to see the updates immediately. So that's all that we have for tonight's episode. On behalf of the team here at Focus and the Family Singapore, we want to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So good night, everyone. God bless you.
Good night.
Good night.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.